Hello, everyone. This is Enamul Haque from Bangladesh. And this month, Phil and I are going to talk about the global agriculture market. As we know, the war in Strait of Hormuz or in the Persian Gulf is continuing, and we don't see an end to this. And with that, the global oil price has gone up. And one of the consequences of increasing global oil price is that there is a cost of transportation going up, cost of production going up, cost of fertilizer has gone up. And that has probably going to affect the global food prices around the world. I have with me my friend Philip Shaw. He is a global expert, particularly an expert in terms of agriculture market. He does the commentary on agriculture prices on different parts in North America. And given his expertise, I thought we should get into this and discuss this for the global audience that we serve in the East-West. Let me also tell you that Philip Shaw is one of the big farmers in Canada, and he actually farms about nearly 1,000 acres of land, if I'm not wrong. And he does produce soybean, wheat, and corn. So I think given this background, I thought it is beneficial for the audience of East West to get it from Philip Shaw, who is not only produces but also monitors the global food agriculture prices in North America. So with that, Phil, what is going to happen with the food prices this year? Because a lot of prediction exists that the price of food is going to go up with the global war continuing, and we don't see an end to it. So let us update, give us an update on this.
Well, thank you very much, Enamul. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on something that I know a fair bit about and study all the time, and write for several different publications across the United States and Canada, as well as producer groups here in Eastern Canada. I know a little bit more about the price of grain than football, where we talked about last year. Congratulations to Spain for winning the World Cup. I watched it the other day and it was great excitement. But with regard to food prices and with regard to agricultural commodities, what we are finding now is that the price of agricultural commodities, specifically grain, is higher than it was a year ago. And right at the present time, it's undetermined where it's going to go. But keep in mind where the grain is grown in the world. If you take corn and soybeans, the largest exporter and producer of corn and soybeans in the world is Brazil. Brazil is an agricultural superpower, and you got to keep in mind it's in the southern hemisphere. So it actually grows two crops of corn, and their second crop they grow is actually larger than the first crop they grow. And with regard to soybeans, they're the largest producer in the world and the largest exporter in the world. And most of those soybeans go to almost 100 million metric tons go to China. So keep in mind that season is opposite to what it is in the northern hemisphere right now. Their production will start ramping up in October. And of course, the other big areas of grain production in North America, in the United States and Canada with corn and soybeans. And of course, you have Western Europe. You also have Russia, which is the largest exporter of wheat in the world. And then, of course, you have Australia and Argentina, different parts of South America that produce a lot of grain. And Enamul mentioned it briefly, the war in Iran with the United States has caused, it's been up and down with regard to energy prices, and to a large extent, the price of grain followed energy prices earlier. And when we had the memorandum of understanding there, what was it, a month ago now? It was for 60 days. Well, it seems to be all blown up now. We had the price of oil go down lower than it was before the war started, and now it's on its way up again, and so is the price of grain. But keep in mind, there's another war that we've talked about at length with East-West here, and that's the Russia-Ukraine war, which, it's hard to know the truth because truth is the first casualty of any war. But when that started back in 2022, we had a huge increase in the price of wheat, and because Russia is the largest exporter of wheat in the world. And now we have Ukraine having much more success in the battlefield. At the same time, they're firing on port facilities in the Black Sea, as well as the Ukrainians are neutralizing Russian shipping out of the Sea of Azov, where most of the Russian wheat is exported out into the Black Sea. So markets hate uncertainty.
Yes.
Agricultural commodity markets, they hate uncertainty. And so when you have ships being fired on and neutralized, it just adds to the uncertainty in the market, just like in the United States Iran war type of thing. That adds all kinds of uncertainty in the energy market. And this has meant that the price of some of these agricultural commodities has risen. However, there is another natural part of this, if you think about it. It has to do with the grain fundamentals. Like, for instance, corn and soybeans and wheat are naturally growing cultivars in different parts of the world. And what we've had extremely hot and dry weather in Western Europe. And so that crop has been compromised about. They're expecting the corn crop in France to be about 40% less than usual. Ditto for many other crops like wheat in Western Europe. In Russia, they've had their exports have are down significantly, partly because of weather, but also partly because of the war. And in North America at the present time, it is very warm, it is very dry, and markets are responding by naturally going up. So when you have
So,
this going on, it will all depend on what happens with regard to weather in North America, because the United States grows enough corn and soybeans. If they've got a really good crop, it would have a mitigating effect on the price rises. But as of now, the prices are higher. They possibly might go higher, they possibly might not. We really don't know now. But generally speaking, if you're thinking about the price of food, whether that be Western Europe, North America, Asia, I know the price of rice comes into Asia because rice is much more of a staple there. I'm not as familiar with the price of rice. But or if you're in Africa and places like that, generally speaking, these prices will be rising, whether it's grain prices or any agricultural commodity, and therefore food prices are likely to rise again,
in,
or keep rising or keep at this level.
interesting, Phil. I was looking at the data, and they said this last year was a bumper production. Production was quite high. And what you mentioned this year, probably because of El Nino, the whole weather factor is one. Second is which I forgot, which is the Ukraine war, because both Ukraine and Russia are the big producer of wheat, and now we have the war. So three factors are probably going to contribute to the rise in the prices of food. And my question to you, when you see this whole prediction, particularly on the futures, grain futures and others, what is the current trend? What percentage it is before the, let's say, a year ago from today?
Compared to a year ago, prices are higher, futures prices are higher, but they're very volatile.
Mhm.
Like I would say they're about 20% higher now than they were a year ago. But we don't really know whether that's going to continue or whether they're going to go down into the fall period when harvest happens. Now, keep in mind, we've had a bigger crop last year. We had big crops everywhere, but we also have something that you don't think about too often, record food demand or record demand for these products. And I think it's uncanny, really. Like, for instance, I think the total usage for corn in the United States this year is 16 billion bushels, and the crop last year was 17 billion. When you and I were in university, it was the total crop was about 7 billion bushels. So that's how supply has risen through the years.
That's
And
everywhere, Phil. If I look at Bangladesh, I still remember when I was young, Bangladesh had hard time feeding its we had 75 million people. And now we have four times the production compared to 1972. And we have almost like triple the population. So that has happened around that. My question to you also in terms of your own cost of production, since you produce, how much it has gone up?
Well, it's gone up about 10 to 15% over this past year. But I'm
First,
sure if we brought in our Bangladeshi farmers and we talked about how production has risen through the years, they might complain about the prices they're getting for their rice, and they might say their production costs have gone up even higher than that.
yes.
Uh, so I think we can say that whether it's a Bangladeshi farmer, myself in Canada, or anybody else, that production costs have risen. Typically, in an agricultural sense, you don't necessarily recover those costs at times. It depends what happens to you and depends what happens in your crop year. In Bangladesh, I know lately you've had a lot of, well, I think you're getting into the monsoon season. You know much more about it than me, but there's always difficulty with flooding. Here, there's always difficulty with dry weather, and so
This year,
that will impact futures prices as we look ahead.
yeah, this year is a bad year even for monsoon flooding. We had a heavy rainfall around in the country. So I'm not sure whether planting season will start in August, end of August onward. So that's where September 1st is the major cropping rice production season. So it will depend on the future, at least in the next 1 month, what is happening in the flooding. But in terms of Bangladesh, we have been increasing our share of wheat consumption. We have been depending on soybean quite a lot for edible oil. So quite a lot of people, and this is true, I think if you go to Southeast Asia, palm oil is one substitute available. In India, it's mostly soybean oil. In China, it's mostly soybean. Soybean is also in terms of their food is part of the soybean meals are there. So I'm looking at the global world, and I can see about what you are saying, that 20-25% increase in the price of food. That will be devastating for many countries, as I see, because many countries are not prepared for it. Our biggest trouble is something else, because as the food price increases, government is going to try hard to reduce the food price, and which means the farmers will be adversely affected because their cost of production has gone up. And whereas their prices, market prices, because it's a staple food, governments in around the world normally keep the prices down. What do you think in the Canadian context?
Well, that's certainly true in the Bangladeshi context and almost everywhere else. One of the differences is the United States subsidizes their farmers very heavily. And so that typically means that production stays high and production costs rise too, but typically they're heavily subsidized. Mr. Trump, regardless of how you feel about them, he treats the American farmer very well, and they get a lot of government revenue that's sent to them to deal with some of the tariff issues that are kind of self-created there. But you're right. You're very right. I mean, there's going to be pressure in a place like Bangladesh and other places to keep these food prices down, and it's going to be put increasing pressure on Bangladeshi farmers to produce. But keep in mind, you can make an argument that Bangladesh is an agricultural superpower too, but your domestic market is so large that you actually consume all that rice that's produced. So, you get into what we call an agricultural vicious cycle. You try to get more efficient, which generally ends up with much more production, which generally lowers price. And then you
Exactly.
got to get more efficient again, and it just goes around in a circle, and it makes it very difficult at any particular time. It just so happens that right now, there's enough outside variables with regard to the war in Iran, with regard to what's going on in the Black Sea between the Ukraine and Russia, that there are some real variables that are almost a powder keg that could make this thing go much higher this summer, depending what happens with weather. Now, we're not there yet. I kind of hope we don't get there, but it could happen. It could happen for sure.
Thank you, Phil. This is a great talk between us, but I think it will benefit everyone because everyone at least in our region, are worried about food prices because there are a lot of people who are living under poverty, and food prices going up is always a big question for the government, for the policies around Asia, in many countries within Asia. So with that, thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for listening to East West this month.